Shwmai a chroeso I Sgyrsiau ar gyfer Yfory. Hello and welcome to Talks for Tomorrow. My name is Steffan Powell, and I'm going to be hosting this podcast series, which is hopefully here to help us get the conversation going ahead of the Wales Climate Week virtual conference that we're hosting this week. The idea is that this series is going to spark some conversations and getting you thinking about practical and meaningful ways to reduce carbon emissions in Wales over the next 5 years and, of course, beyond as well. I really think that you're going to enjoy spending time with our guest for this episode. It's Jonathon Murray. He is the man who's trying to bring governments and industry together to get the transport sector to zero emissions. He's the managing director of the non-profit organisation Zemo, and he's got 20 plus years of expertise in this field. So there's not many people more qualified to talk about this stuff than Jonathon. So Jonathon, croeso, welcome to Talks for Tomorrow.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Jonathon, you are the man who is trying to bring governments and industry together to try and get the transport sector to zero emissions. And you're a kayak enthusiast.
Indeed, I am.
Important to get that in,
Yeah.
because Wales, isn't it? Now, Jonathon, you've been managing director of the non-profit organisation Zemo, not Zemo, Zemo, with 20 plus years of expertise in this field. So there's not many people more qualified to talk with about this stuff than you, Jonathon. So thank you very much for being with us. So welcome along to Talks for Tomorrow. Croeso I Sgyrsiau ar gyfer Yfory. Let's start then, Jonathon, by setting the scene. Where are we at the moment? How are things looking?
Well, back in 2003, which is when Zemo Partnership, as it was then Low Carbon Vehicle Partnership, was set up, transport was seen as being one of the areas that are going to be most difficult to tackle in terms of decarbonising it. Partly because of the different sectors and the number of stakeholders involved, whether it be vehicle manufacturers, fleet operators, fuel providers, local authorities, transport authorities, highway authorities, leasing companies, a whole array of different stakeholders. And we were set up to help that stakeholder engagement to help shape policy formation. And that's what we've been doing over the last 22 years. Over that time, when we started this, road transport, talking about the UK as a whole, was the third highest sector. It's proven difficult to reduce, but we are making progress. Other sectors have reduced faster. For example, energy, where the UK has made the most reductions. Energy was the highest sector. It's now transport. Transport remains the highest sector. Now in Wales, it's a slightly different situation, probably due to the rural nature of mid to North Wales. But their emissions from transport is lower than for the UK as a whole. But I think that shows some of the issues that need to be addressed in terms of decarbonising transport in Wales, which are different and distinct from the rest of the United Kingdom.
Yeah, and we'll get on to the details of some of those later on in the podcast now. Suppose it's not surprising that the transport sector has been a bit reticent to make changes, I guess, right? Because it's ultimately, is it down to cash? Is that why it's ended up as the top emitter at the moment?
No, I think it's more to do with the needing to bring the right products to market, whether it be vehicles, whether it be fuels, whether it be deploying charging stations for electric vehicles. That takes time, that takes investment. And then you've actually got to get those vehicles, those fuels into the market. And a car, once you buy a car, that car is going to be operating for the next 10, 15 years. A bus, it could be 20 years. So, the progress that was made, we're seeing the benefits of the progress and the actions that were taken perhaps 10 years ago now is what's delivering the emission savings today. And what we do today will be delivering the emission savings to 2030, 2035, 2040.
Yeah.
And I think that's the inherent inertia in the system that's causing it. But also, transport is something that we depend upon. We can't take it lightly. We've got to, when we move and we change it, we've got to do it in a way that's practical, commercial, and is also fair and just transition. So I think it's actually quite a complicated system that we've got to take care of, because when transport doesn't work, we see the economy crash.
Yeah.
The M4 is closed in South Wales, and South Wales will get gridlocked, and it has an impact straight away.
Yeah.
And that's what we've got to take care of transport and make sure that the actions we take aren't detrimental to the system. At the same time, there's great opportunities to benefit from it at the same time.
Interesting coming on to those opportunities then, because what you've set out there is quite a significant set of challenges for people to be thinking about and talking about now over the next couple of days. What are those opportunities then? Because it sounds to me like you've painted quite a tricky picture to overcome there, Jonathon. But what are those opportunities and positives in this sort of overall situation as we currently see it?
Well, looking back, we've seen big benefits in terms of the cost, reducing the cost of motoring over the last decade. Decade or so ago, very few battery electric vehicles, very few plug-in hybrid vehicles on the roads. We've seen those introduced. We've seen fuel efficiency of the fleet reduce as a result of that, and carbon emissions benefits coming out of that. But there's been a link between transport and the number of miles driven and the wealth of the economy. And so, benefits in terms of reductions of average CO2 per kilometre driven has been counteracted by growth in miles driven and the growth of the economy. So this is a dichotomy. We've got to get unlink transport from the growth in the economy so that we can reduce emissions and de-link it from the growth in the economy. So, in terms of you and I as motorists or a fleet operator, one of the big things that we pay for is, our fuel. The purchase of our vehicles is a major capital expenditure for all of us, whether we're buying new or second hand. Like myself, I've just recently bought a Renault Zoe electric vehicle, 7 years old, and an absolute snip. And now I can drive that car at perhaps 3 pence per kilometre, perhaps even lower. And if I'm charging at home and I've got solar panels on the roof, that's free electricity. So, the opportunities there are for cheap, clean, transport in the future, whether you and I are a private motorist or whether you're a commercial fleet.
And we'll get onto the details in a second. And you think that there is work there to be done in terms of making the general public sort of aware that there is potential cost savings if they go down the green route? Or is that link being made strongly enough? Because it seems to me like sometimes the sell is always on trying to protect and save the planet, which is, of course, a lot of us are here to do. But there's also people are concerned about their bank balance at the moment. There is a cost of living crisis out there. And perhaps is that link being made enough? And is that perhaps the opportunity you're talking about?
Well, yes. Again, transport is sort of multifaceted. So, we've now sort of focused in on talking about emissions from personal cars and fuel efficiency and the moving to electric vehicles.
But it could be with businesses who've got commercial fleets and things as well, right?
Equally, it could be about modal shift and moving to public transport, buses. It could be about active travel, walking and cycling. So there's a number of different options, and a lot of that is linked to behaviour and behavioural change and how you engage with people, whether it is consumers, you and I, as the general public, or whether it is businesses, trying to convince them to make to do something that's different. I once was told by a fleet manager who said, if you got a fleet manager, he bleeds diesel. Now, first of all, in the future, we want she's as well as he's as fleet managers, and that's increasingly become the case. But we also got, we've got to break out of these paradigms, these barriers that allow us to think differently and seize these opportunities. Just reflecting my personal experience, in terms of looking at an electric vehicle, I mean, apart from the fact, it's something that's practical for me, it saves me money, it's a joy to drive. I really can't tell you how good these vehicles are, and these options, across the park, there are different benefits that are, that can be exposed and people can be made aware of, and it can be a pleasure and a financial benefit in terms of switching to doing something that saves the planet.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. So let's dive into some of these details that we've been teasing, Jonathon, already. You've touched a little bit about how important infrastructure is to the swap to use more electric vehicles commercially, personally, etc. When it comes to Wales, that can be a challenge, right? Because of the very nature of the country. You've talked about the rurality and mid Wales and up, if you will. what are those challenges, and how difficult is it going to be to overcome those challenges to allow more people in Wales to get access to electric vehicles?
Well, I think there's two big issues that you've got to consider here. One is having a fair and just transition, and that is about making sure that the transition is accessible to everybody, whether it's sort of high density housing, flats, terrace streets without off-street parking for private individuals is more difficult in terms of electrification and charging at home. The same is true for small fleets, or for fleets where the drivers take the vehicles home. So we've got to think about a fair and just transition. It can't be something that's just for people with driveways. It can't be people who can afford to pay at rapid recharge stations. Mm-hmm. So they're making it accessible. At the same time, the other element is that in terms of electrification, we've got to take into account the grid. And the M4 corridor, if you like, on the south coast of Wales is well served in terms of electrification. As you go north into mid Wales, into North Wales, the grid, has been a backbone in terms of ensuring that the lights will always go on, but it's a very efficient system, so there's not headroom in it. So we need to, the load that will come onto the demand for load, the demand for electricity that electrification will put on the grid means that we need to start planning to reinforce the grid now so that we can connect those charge points in years to come. In terms of those charge points, it's important part of this is public charging, whether it's on street or whether it's en route or destination. It's important to have the right mix of charging, and it's not just the numbers; it's the right charge rate. So it's the right charge at the right time in the right place. So if there's bizarre examples that anybody with an electric vehicle will tell you about, where there's the slow charge public charge point in a public car park where you can only stay for 20 minutes. So there's absolutely no point in plugging it in. There just isn't. Yeah. So I'm
not very good at maths, Jonathan, but that doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense at all. It doesn't. It's fitting it into if you need on street charging, you need public charge points within a couple of minutes walk, accessible, well lit. You don't want them in places where people will feel happy to go and charge their vehicles. If you're going on the strategic road network, if you go onto the raid roads, you need those rapid charge points at regular intervals so that it's convenient. And if you're going to a destination, whether it be a sports centre, whether it be a supermarket, whether it be a hotel, whether it be your place of work, having charging posts there as well. So it's having the right mix.
Whose responsibility is it to get those charging stations in the right place? Is it something that private businesses should be doing more of? Is it entirely down to the Welsh Government? Is it a mix of both? Or can communities take control?
I think from that perspective, government, whether it's Welsh Government or local authorities, have a duty to enable and guide and have that strategic view as to how the infrastructure is deployed. But I think there's also a role there for the private sector, whether it be charge point operators themselves investing to build their networks, whether it be businesses putting in charge points so that the employees can use it. So it's a mix. It's a mix, but there's definitely a strategic role for government in terms of ensuring the right direction.
So a mixed responsibility then, essentially, Jonathan, to increase the number of charging points. You were talking about the grid as well and needing to improve the grid. Is that something that can be done in a 5-10 year time period, or is that actually a longer term goal? Because we're just trying to think that sometimes people can get a bit disillusioned or disheartened when they realise that the changes that need to be made aren't going to be able to be done or can't be seen to have been changed for a longer period of time, whereas sometimes shorter, earlier wins, as it were, can encourage people to do even bigger and better things. Yeah. So is that something that can be done in that sort of time frame?
Well, this is one of the fascinating things for me, was actually getting engaged with the energy system and Ofgem and National Grid and the distribution network operators, which in Wales is NGED and SPEN. And there's a revolution going on there in terms of what they're doing with the grid, building capacity, building a smart grid that copes with solar panels coming on, wind farms coming on, distribution generation. So there's a real revolution, a lot of investment going in. And there are regular plans going on being developed by the distribution network operators, which they have to present to Ofgem and say, this is what we're going to be doing over the next period of time. This is how we're going to build the grid. This is the load, the investment we're going to be making. So at the moment, it's really important that we build bridges, that we make that engagement between the energy sector and the transport sector, because what they need to know is where is that transport demand going to be for those charge points. And it's not just transport, we're seeing heat pumps in homes, we're seeing data centers which are gobbling up energy on the grid. So, there's a lot of demand, future demand for the grid. So the investment is going on. It's going on at a rapid pace. And it's making sure that we have that headroom built in so that we can coordinate the connections to the grid. And it's going to be one of those situations where, as individuals, if you want a charge point in your home, you have to connect to, you have to inform your distribution network operator. He will give you the go-ahead as to whether you can connect, and that's important at the moment because there are hot points on the grid. It could be in your own street, your own substation. It could be a more widespread thing, but they have that view as to whether and when, making sure that the grid is ready for what you want to do.
Yeah.
But equally, once you start moving away from the individual, if you go to a bus station at the moment, in terms of electrification, the bus sector in the UK is way ahead of cars, way ahead of commercial vehicles. At the moment across the UK, bus stations as a depot are being transferred to electric vehicles. But there you've got to look at how the demand load for a bus station is big.
Yeah.
It's as big as a factory. So, you have to, there it's about planning where you can connect to the grid, how you can connect to the grid, and investing in that by the bus companies as well. And that's going to become an issue increasingly it's going to become an issue for commercial vehicle sector as we start to move into the businesses and commercial vehicles, whether it be vans to start with, then moving on to trucks.
Yeah, and talking about that commercial sector there then, what are the challenges when it comes to trying to get the businesses in Wales to swap to electric vehicles? Because in my head, when I knew we were going to have this conversation, I'm thinking, right, big commercial sectors in Wales that have probably used sort of gas guzzling machines or whatever, as in old ways you'd sort of frame it. You'd think agriculture, right? Is agriculture? Are there other sectors that need to swap to electrification? Is that doable? How easy is it to have electric tractors? I don't know. I'm an idiot here, so I'm asking the expert. So is that stuff doable?
It is, and increasingly that's happening, and it's happening. The easier operations to electrify are starting, and that's probably vans, car-derived vans, postal vans, your Ford Transits, those Sprinter vans, those kind of vehicles are starting to switch to electrification, and in particular certain kind of operations, a parcel delivery is ideal for electrification.
Yeah.
Then you talk to people like the utilities. Utilities at the moment, whether it be Welsh Water or National Grid or whoever it might be, they're looking to reduce the emissions of their fleet. They're looking to invest in it, but there they've got more demanding operations. So they could be going off to fix a substation somewhere in mid Wales one day, and the next day they'll be in West Wales, and the next day they'll be somewhere else. So they've got to have a vehicle that can able to have a much greater range, but also needs the infrastructure that we were talking about earlier in the right places to be able to charge at the right times.
Yeah.
So they're different solutions, maybe part of a bridging technology. So one of the things that we're looking at, and is a real option, is looking at low carbon sustainable fuels. At the moment in the UK, we have a government policy which recognises what biofuels, what sustainable low carbon fuels can be mixed in with to reduce the emissions in petrol and diesel. Today, on your petrol station, you go in, if you fill up with regular 4-star, you'll see it says E10, which means it's a 10% bioethanol blend. If you look at your diesel pump, it'll say B7 because it's a 7% biodiesel blend. So there are options to actually go beyond that, not in your petrol station, but if you're a fleet operator, you can certainly look to go for a higher blend of sustainable fuels in your mix when you're refueling at a bunkered stock, on a depot.
Yeah.
So there's other options we can use to reduce it. There's some really interesting cutting-edge examples of other types of technologies. There's a project not very far from here, actually, in Newport, High Hall. Now they're looking at hydrogen as a fuel for big trucks. Where you have it in what's called an electric fuel cell, and they use hydrogen to generate electricity on board the vehicle, and it basically acts as replaces the battery, and the rest of it's an electric vehicle. Those are fascinating technological solutions. And for some instances, particularly if you're talking something where you've got a big truck that is fully laden, or is going for very long distances, electrification, battery electric vehicles may not be the final solution.
Yeah.
It may be something else.
Because sometimes any change is scary or spooky, especially if you're running a business, right? And, times are tough and money's tight and what have you. And then for someone to turn around and say, oh, you need to do this, which could be very expensive. And, that can cause concern for people. But sometimes, so it sounds like there are bridging technologies that can sort of ease that transition to make people who are concerned about the cost of all of this actually seem a bit more palatable, a bit more doable, a bit more achievable.
Yeah, well, yes. And I think it's part of what we need to think about is what's the right... One is to be engaged and understand the opportunities, understand the issues and what are the potential solutions and what's the direction of travel, but also to understand what's practical for you. For all of us, we and this comes back to the behavioural aspect. Is what's the right thing for what can I do at the moment? What will and that might be cycling to work. Getting fit. It might be switching to an electric vehicle. It might be, if you're a business, okay, we can't electrify, but perhaps we can use low carbon fuels in our fleet. It might be saying, okay, let's talk to our DNO and have a conversation with them about when we can electrify and when the grid, and if the grid is able to support us. And put together an investment plan with the DNO so that we're planning, they're building the reinforcement, the investment in the grid into their plans as we're building our investment plans for our vehicles.
Yeah.
And it's about that coordination. It's about walking the path together, understanding, have some consensus about what's the direction of travel, what's the right step for me, and how can I take that step.
What does DNO mean?
Distribution network operator. Apologies.
No, I did good. I just wanted to double check.
It's the people. So it's National Grid Energy in Wales.
Yeah.
It's National Grid Energy Distribution and SP Energy Networks, and they're the people who stand between the national grid and your electricity supplier. So they're the people who provide the wires that deliver electricity to your home or to your business. But they're not the people actually on your energy.
And we're going to quiz people on that question later on during Wales Climate Week. So I hope they've been listening, Jonathan.
Supplementary question: when does it become a DSO rather than
well,
DNO?
there we are. We'll put that in. If you get it right, 10 points to you. What do you say? Interesting, you're talking about sort of individual choice there for people to start gaining consensus and making that societal shift, right? And your examples there, people making their decisions as businesses or as individuals to make those changes that then hopefully has a knock-on effect across society. What's your answer? Because I get this put to me fairly regularly when I'm having these conversations on the radio, the telly, or whatever, even at home or whatever. When someone says, well, why should I make a change? Because that country over there is building X amount of new power points, or this president over there is making decisions that are actually undermining the electric vehicle sector, or whatever it might be. The sort of, why should I make a granular change at my community level when the big global headwinds aren't necessarily always going in the direction we want them to be going in? How's you, as someone who's been in this space for a long time now, Jonathan, how do you respond to that?
Well, you look at the big global picture at the moment. It's a kind of scary place, isn't it? So, and a lot of opinions sort of flying in from different directions. For me, it's about understanding my own personal situation. I think you have to. The bedrock you have to turn to is what's right for you and what's the right thing to do. For me. Okay, climate change, net zero, these are strange terms. It's very difficult to connect with. I think we can all connect to with the increase in extreme weather storms that we've had, whether it be flooding, whether it be droughts in summer, whether it be fires, and these are quite clearly being driven by climate change. And to me, that's a very real thing, and that's something I don't want my kids to face. So I think we need to change. I'm not worried about what happens in another part of the world. I want to know about what I can do and what's right here. But equally, some of the decisions you can make are ones that are positive. And I go back to my choice of driving an electric vehicle. Now is a great time to go out and get a second-hand electric vehicle. There's bargains to be had out there. So go and get yourself a great deal, drive a lovely car, and save yourself money.
Yeah, and it's that two-pronged approach for you then, Joe. There's something about the impact it's having on communities that you're close to now, and also it's a chance to save cash. And those are a way that you think you can sell that to a broader public who maybe aren't as engaged in this stuff at the moment.
Yeah,
interesting.
Absolutely. And I think for businesses as well, increasingly. There are large businesses that are saying, what we want is to operate in the right way, to know our supply chains are operating in the right way, and that can improve your opportunities for winning new contracts. So I think that increasing that's a business opportunity as well.
A couple more questions of this before we move on to look at sort of the future. Talk to me about road pricing. As a man who didn't know much about road pricing before preparing for this interview, and some people listening might be unsure as to what we mean. What is it, and what part can it play in this?
That's a really interesting one. In its most fundamental form, it would be being taxed for driving down the road, for the number of kilometres you drive down the road, and perhaps where and when you drive down the road. Examples of this type of thing, perhaps the congestion charge in London. Mm-hmm. Where during working hours and during the working week you're charged to go into London, and that's to encourage people not to go into London at those times. So there's an incentive mechanism that can be provided there, but it's being charged to use the road at a national level, and that's usually where people talk about road price charging. One of the fundamental things is I think there's two elements to this. Is UK government is wedded to fuel duty. They get a lot of money out of fuel duty, and the switch to electric vehicles and the reduction in that is going to see that reducing over time. So how do you replace that? And one option might be to be charging people to use the road. It can also be used as a mechanism to encourage people to use the roads at different times to avoid congested periods or locations, encouraging people to switch to using buses, modal shift, public transport, encouraging people to use park and ride at the edge of cities to avoid congestion in the city. So it's a way of charging people to use the roads, and it's so that's at its basic. It's in what you do with it.
It's essentially that. So if the carrot, if you will, is the opportunity to save money and to make a difference to your community, then the stick would potentially be another form of taxation, essentially.
It could be, could be, a stick. Yeah, that's right. And I think where it would be used most heavily would be to avoid congestion.
Yeah.
Which is
it's good. It's a talking point that can get people going this week, and we can discuss the pros and cons. And we're talking about a lot of our conversations been about bringing the public along with you. That's a one that no doubt people will have thoughts on during the week.
I mean, it's an interesting one because nobody's got a firm idea of how it would work.
Yeah.
So
maybe we can figure it out this week.
Yeah.
Who knows? Let's look to the future then to finish this off, Jonathon. What do you think the future looks like? Are you a glass half full or a glass half empty kind of guy?
Right, I'm really positive about where we're going. I think there's opportunities out there that, some of the things that if you look at what life was like pre-COVID and after COVID, that had quite a dramatic impact. The amount of use of online meetings to avoid travel hugely increased, and there's that acted as a behavioural change, you know. And I think, you know, there's other behavioural changes that we can make that will make it better. Yeah. Why commute if you don't need to commute? I work as a hybrid sort of office. So, you know, it gives me, you know, when I'm staying and working from home, that gives me an extra couple of hours a day. Yeah. What's not to like about that? Reducing pollution, reducing the impact on the health of the nation, reducing congestion, reducing the cost of transport. I think there's real positive things that will come out of this, and and I think we're going to go for a real revolution. And by the time we get to, you know, the next decade or so, we're going to see a real revolution, which will leave us in a much better place, and a more resilient place. At the moment, you know, we've had in the past, I recall, you might not be old enough to, but oil crisis. You know, in the 1970s, you know, shortage of oil, OMG, it was a disaster. You know, fuel security is an important thing in the world we live in, and you know, electrification frees us from that as well.
So, what would you, if you were part of the discussions this week, what would you focus your thoughts on and your brain space on, thinking of ideas? Because we're talking about wanting to create practical and meaningful opportunities and change in the next 5 to 10 years. If you were the Welsh Government, if you were part of the discussions this week, what would you focus on?
I'd be focusing on the really practical steps that can unlock this in the short term. And there's some really interesting ones that we're looking at with Welsh Government. You know, things like, okay, how can you bring communities together to work together? For example, bringing businesses on business park together to say, okay, you know, let's think about, do we all want to electrify our fleets? And if so, let's go and jointly have a conversation with our electricity provider to see whether it's possible and get a better deal out of that. Improving the way that, you know, one of the things that the smaller fleets in Wales, they buy a lot of vehicles that are like second owner. Vehicles get cascaded into them, bought from the rest of the UK. There must be some opportunities there to open up avenues to get electric vehicles as used vehicles from some of the large fleets that have bought these vehicles. They're going to be in their fleet for 4 or 5 years. Well, you know, let's see if we can find a ready-made market for them in Wales. Let's see about looking at innovative ways that we can come together to reduce the cost by it through finance packages and innovative finance. I think we should be reaching out and talking to the banking community in Wales. A lot of SMEs raise their money through retail banking outlets, not corporate banking. So, you know, we need to bring those communities with us, because it's all part of a community moving in the same direction and having a clear view of where we're going, but understanding what the short-term practical steps that will improve and take us on that pathway are going to be really important.
And just to finish up, you've talked about how positive you feel at the moment. You've been doing this for a long time. Is this the best you've felt about how things could change in looking towards the future? Because not everybody necessarily feels optimistic as you, Jonathan. No. So it's good to have, the glass half full side of things. But you know, you've been doing it for a long while. Yeah. What gives you the confidence to say, actually, no, this revolution's coming. Yeah. It's just trust me. It's on the way.
It's on the way. Definitely, it's on the way. I mean, There's times when you have to take a step back, but as long as you take 2 steps forward for every step back you take, you hate making progress. And there's no point in the last 2 decades where I've seen, the mood shift has changed. The last 2 decades were about securing the supply of these things, getting vehicle manufacturers to build them and design them and start to manufacture them, getting fuel suppliers to provide these low carbon fuels, getting investment in the grid. That's starting to happen. It's about deployment now. It's about acceptance into the market. And I think that's a different paradigm. It's a different dynamic. You know, it's now becoming much more accessible to everybody, whether it's UI or whether it's fleets of organisations of different sizes. There are things all of us can do now.
Well, Jonathan, thank you very much for being with us on Talks for Tomorrow. And all the best. And thanks for giving us plenty to think about, lots to talk about now during the rest of the Wales Climate Week. And thank you very much for listening and for watching as well. And I will see you at the conference.